going to focus on this continuation from the book of Revelation, but I just want to mention, if you look at this gospel today, it fits so perfectly to St. Catherine of Alexandria that God himself gives St. Catherine of Alexandria a wisdom in speaking that all your adversaries will be powerless to resist or refute. So there's this beautiful image of courage, that no matter what we face, ultimately God is bigger. And that's what St. Catherine of Alexandria realized. And even the fact that she died in the end, she was beheaded, but she reigns in heaven. She actually lives more fully life than even we are living right now. So there's this victory. So let's look at this continuation. This is, I think, the 8th of these homilies just on the book of Revelation. So if you want to look more at the themes of the book of Revelation, you can look back and see some of those ones there. So we have, this is chapter 15. There's 22 chapters. And so we've gone through a lot already. We've gone through the image of the woman clothed with the sun, the dragon, who is the ultimate rival against that woman, trying to defeat the woman, but can't, trying to devour the child that she will give birth to, but is not able to. That's ultimately an image of Mary, an image primarily of Mary, but also the church of the new Israel, and then Christ is ultimately that child to be born. So they are the two signs. That word sign is, there's 3 times in which you hear that in the book of Revelation. This is the 3rd of those signs. You have the one sign, the woman. The second sign, the dragon. This is the 3rd sign, which means this is another very big, important moment. And it's great and awe-inspiring. And it's the 7 angels of the 7 last plagues. Remember, 7 is that perfect number. For through them, God's fury is accomplished. All the other seals, and trumpets, all of those situations, different plagues that came, they were called judgments. This is the first time in which you hear God's fury. So this is a more intense experience. And this is ultimately God's definitive crushing the head of the serpent. He's already crushed the head of the serpent. We even see this, and it says, those who were standing, who had won the victory over the beast. So there's already this victory that's already happening. But then there's this kind of already and not yet. Christ has already won the victory, but there is this culmination in which, in the very end, everything, including the last enemy to be destroyed is death, all of that will be under the feet of the Lord. So he's already victorious, and yet there's this working out of that victory throughout all of history and throughout all of time as well. So this God's fury is not so much God having a bad day, but it's the love of God, because God is only mercy itself. That he doesn't sort of switch back and forth. Sometimes we have this from just maybe our own experience of human persons. Sometimes they're having good days, and then they turn on us. Sometimes they're having good days, and they're merciful, and then they're really mean. That's not God. God is always love. But when we follow the covenant, when we are joined to Christ, then that is experienced as mercy. But when we're holding on to something that can't be in God's sight, it's kind of like we're holding on to a log, and that log is going over the waterfall. And the waterfall, in a certain sense, could be, God's love. But if we're holding on to that thing, well, it's pushing away everything that's not of God. And God is saying to us, please let go of that. That's not going to help you. But we hold on to it, and it's just like Gollum holding on to the ring as he goes into the lake of fire in Mount Doom, and he says, I have to hold on to this. And because he's holding on to it, he's destroyed with the ring. So God's fury is not so much that God hates us, but he hates sin. He hates evil. And when we hold on to it, when we, in a sense, espouse ourselves to evil and say, I choose this, well, God is having his arms open, saying, please come back to me. And we say no, and we go off the waterfall. That's not so much God having a bad day, but that's us being stubborn, being stiff-necked. And we experience God's love, which cleanses. It's like the floodwaters in Noah's time, or like the Red Sea. It clears away all evil, and if we're holding on to the evil, then we experience that love as God's fury. Do you see how that works there? So it's not God being like two-faced. He's not kind of going back and forth. He just loves. But are we going to hold on to something that ultimately will transform God's love into fury? Or are we going to let it go and say, I'm going to hold on to you instead? I'm going to bathe in the waters of the living waters that cleanse my soul and allow the waters to, in a sense, pass through me and wipe away everything that's not good. All the dirt, all the muck, all those things, to push this branch away from me, versus holding on to it, clinging to it, saying, this is my life. And if it is, then we end up going off the waterfall. So we don't want to be like that. So we go on, it says, you have, this like preparation. So after chapter 15, you're going to hear these different plagues. And they culminate in 10 different plagues, which remind us of the 10 plagues of Egypt. Revelation is talking to us about this breaking the people of God free from the bondage of sin, from the snares of the world, of just rooting out everything that's holding us back from a relationship with Jesus Christ. Because remember that he's the Lamb that wants to marry the church. He's the bridegroom coming for the bride, the New Jerusalem. And he wants that bride to be spotless, to have the radiant white dress. That's why in weddings we have white dresses, without spot, without blemish. It's an image of the church. It's an image of what we see in the book of Revelation. So the book of Revelation, again, is not supposed to be a scary sci-fi novel, but it's ultimately about this wedding. And it's about God wanting to just cleanse everything so that he can truly receive his beautiful bride and not let anything touch her. And we have to make sure that we're living in that bride versus holding on to the things of the dragon, the beast, of those different things. Because we'll hear about later, all of those things, they get thrown into the lake of fire. We don't want to be there. We want to be with the Lamb. And we want to be like these people here. We hear about this, I saw something like a sea of glass mingled with fire. That image is, we already saw that in the throne room of the one who sits on the throne and the Lamb. And that sea of glass is sort of like in the ancient world, how they saw, you have the heavens and you have the earth, and you have sort of, they call it the firmament. It's sort of like taking the ocean and splitting it. So there's sort of like an ocean up here and an ocean down here. And that's why they would look up and they would say, well, that's why the sky is blue. And the rain, it actually comes through holes in the firmament. This is just an ancient world view of looking at the ancient world. And this is what we're seeing here. So you have, these ones are above that. So they are, in a sense, over all of this. And they're reigning with the Lamb. And you have the sea of glass, now it's mingled with fire, which means that there's a judgment happening on all the things below, this purifying to make the things that are good, true, and beautiful be able to grow. Just like you burn away all the weeds, all the brush, all those things. We see that in some of the farmlands over here, so that there can be a better harvest in the future. It's not a bad thing to burn these things away. You just don't want to be one of the things that get burned away. So then you have, they're on the sea of glass. They were standing, those who had won the victory over the beast, and its image, and the number that has signified its name. So again, that image of 666, you can read that as Nero, and it's any of these kind of powers that, in a sense, persecute the church and attack the people that are faithful to the Lamb. And this is showing that they are victorious over that beast, because that beast is going to get chucked into the lake of fire. So he doesn't win. The people that are with the Lamb win. And they were holding God's harps. And they were singing the song of Moses, the servant of God. This is the song that the Israelites sang after they went through the Red Sea. They saw that they finally were free. It was the final moment in which the enemy was crushed. And now they could start going on to the promised land. And so they sing this song. So this is the new song, because this is the moment in which the church is being brought through. And each one of us, through baptism and living out our baptism, is brought through the waters. So you have the purifying fire, but you have the waters of baptism. And on the other side, when we finally live our baptism and we're with the Lord in heaven, we too sing this song, because we were made to sing. Everything within us becomes a song back to God. Just like if you remember like your favorite song singing, and how it just makes you come alive. You just want to dance, you want to just sing. And that's heaven, is to be able to see that experience of the song that God places in our heart. And it's a song of joy, of praise, of being everything that we were made to be. And notice how these are God's harps. God gives them to us. We don't just sort of create them ourselves. The beautiful thing about happiness comes from not us saying, I am, and I'm going to just create whatever I want to be. But it's, Lord, you are Father to me. And so I'm going to receive my being. I'm going to receive my life. I'm going to receive everything that you made me to be. And I'm going to sing your song, not just make a song up. That's really important, especially for our world right now, in which we many times start with a sense of, I'm the one who determines what I should be, and then I just make myself. But we always leave ourselves in a very pitiful state, because it's much better to be made by the creator of the universe, who's a much better artist than us, versus us trying to just sort of figure out ourselves and make ourselves in kind of a real puny, sort of mediocre way. So this is what they sing. They sing the song of the Lamb. They say, great and wonderful are your works. Just and true are your ways. That's actually a quote from the Song of Moses in Exodus. And it says, for you alone are holy. That's what we sing during the Gloria. Something I mentioned yesterday is that the Mass, almost every single word from the Mass is actually a quote from Scripture. So you actually know more about the Bible than you realize. You are quoting Scripture. You've memorized Scripture without realizing it. But then it says this, it says, all nations will come and worship before you. That's important, because on the one hand, there is this judgment against the nations. But at the same time, all nations will come and worship. And so this is the beautiful thing of Revelation, is that there is conversion that happens. It's not just God kind of up here saying, well, I don't like these people, I don't like these people. He's like, I want everyone to be saved. But you gotta let go of the branch that's going over the waterfall. There will be the judgment, there will be the experience of God's fury if you hold on to it. But if you let go of it, and you come to me, then you too will be singing this song. And everyone is invited. But you have to be able to let go of the branch. That's the key. So God opens his heart completely, but we have to respond.